Hi, my name is Dirk Moyer, and I'd like to share some thoughts about a CDT, a Center for Doctoral Training, for you. I'll share the screen. So our CDT is on uncertainty quantification in digital twins. That's a CDT proposal that we're currently working on at the University of Glasgow. Well, the concept of a digital twin is illustrated in the following cartoon plot. So the left panel shows a physical system, in this case, a robot arm. And the aim is to find the right control parameters in terms of target angles or voltage regulation to control the robot arm's movement. And poor choices of the control parameters can potentially damage the robot arm. For example, if the forces or the accelerations are too high, then you can cause damage for the robot arm. For that reason, you might want to plan and explore the movement and control of the robot arm in silico using a digital twin, and that is illustrated in the right panel. So a digital twin is based on a physical model of the robot arm in terms of classical mechanics of rigid-bodied motion in order to simulate the movement of the robot arm in silico. And this allows you to plan the robot arm's movements and find the optimal control parameters at lower costs, meaning you can run simulations instead of physical experiments, and without putting the robot at risk. So think of a robot that you want to deploy to remove toxic or radioactive substances in a hazardous environment, and you've never used the robot arm in that area, in that environment before, then it is a good idea to actually explore the movement of the robot arm, the control of the robot arm in silico first before deploying it in the real world. And that is what a digital twin can be used for. Now, digital twins are widely used for an increasing number of applications. You are certainly aware that airlines increasingly use flight simulators to train their pilots. Well, a flight simulator is just a digital twin of an aircraft. Virtual drones are digital twins for designing new types of unmanned aircraft and studying their collective behavior. And digital twins are increasingly used in physiology and in medicine. You might have come across the virtual heart project, where the objective is to develop a virtual heart that is a digital twin of the heart for improved patient-specific diagnosis, risk assessment, and the planning of new treatment options. What all these digital twins have in common is that they depend on various parameters. And that is illustrated here for the robot arm. So the movement of the robot arm depends on its geometry and size, on the mass and the masses of the different components, and consequently their moments of inertia, and also the friction at the joints. And these parameters can presumably all be measured, but that's not necessarily feasible in other applications. Let's revisit the virtual heart again. Here, the parameters are related to the biophysical properties of the heart muscle in terms of the contractility, the elasticity, and the flexibility of the heart muscle fibers. But in order to measure them, you would have to extract the heart from the human body. And you can do that in post-mortem studies, but you can't do that in vivo in a living patient. For diagnosis of a living patient in vivo, you cannot measure the relevant patient-specific biophysical parameters. If you think of a complex system like the traffic network, for example, you might be interested in developing a digital twin for optimizing traffic flow and preventing or predicting congestion. Well, that digital twin will depend on a large number of parameters, including the car driver's emotional and cognitive states, which are not amenable to direct measurement. So the challenge is, if we cannot measure the parameters, we need to infer them to calibrate the digital twin. Because an uncalibrated digital twin, whose parameters have not been adequately inferred, gives a distorted representation of the physical world, and that is illustrated here in the right panel, right? Sort of a distortion of the physical space that you see in the left panel. And this can be dangerous, as your uncalibrated digital twin may make wrong predictions, potentially leading to inappropriate decisions based on distorted risk assessment. So the question then is, how can we calibrate the digital twin if we cannot measure its parameters? Well, the idea is illustrated here. We can simulate data from our digital twins, quantities of interest for which the digital twin has been designed in the first place. And you can also measure or observe the same quantities of interest in the physical space. So let's make that more specific by looking at an example. So let's revisit the cardiovascular disease modeling example. So in this case, our real physical space is the patient with a heart, possibly the diseased heart. And you can get measurements of quantities of interest, so our clinical data, using cardiac magnetic resonance imaging. And here's a typical cardiac magnetic resonance image of the heart, and that allows you to measure and quantify the deformations of the heart during the pump cycle. Now let's look at the virtual space. That is our digital twin, that is the virtual heart. Well, the virtual heart allows you to simulate the heart deformations during the pump cycle. Now you can look at the simulated deformations and compare that with the measured deformations using cardiac magnetic resonance imaging, and you can quantify the mismatch. That is a generic concept. Let's look at another example. Let's take a wind turbine, just because, well, in our image, we have a wind turbine here. So in that case, our quantities of interest would be related to the speed, the velocity of the rotor blades, the torque acting on the rotor blades or on the beam, and the voltage that you produce, as an example. So having now measured data and simulated data, the calibration consists in minimizing this mismatch to maximize the agreement between the digital twin and the real world. And in practice, you look at your parameter space. So here we look at 3 parameters for illustration, shown in a box here. You explore the parameters and then find the parameters that minimize this discrepancy. Go through the parameters and do an exhaustive search, find the parameters that minimize the mismatch between the data from the real world and the data that you get from your digital twin. And that gives you a calibrated digital twin. Calibrated in the sense that now your digital twin has maximal agreement with the real world, and we have minimized the distortion that is illustrated in the right panel. Right? So that is a concept. The concept is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. However, there are 2 major challenges. The first challenge is, well, here I assume that the parameters are discrete, indicated by these crosses, but typically your parameters are continuous. That means you have an infinite number of parameters. Secondly, for illustration, I have only assumed we have 3 parameters so that I can draw that as a box, but typically you have many more parameters. You might have dozens of parameters, possibly even hundreds of parameters. That means you have a very complex parameter space that you have searched through. And that means you have the challenge of computational complexity. So in principle, it is straightforward, but in practice, if you do that naively, you have enormous computational complexity. And that is a problem, a practical problem, because you want to make decisions in real time. If you have a problem that works in principle, but it takes you weeks or months until you have the digital twin calibrated, it is of no use for practical applications. The second challenge is related to the fact that with limited and possibly noisy data, you typically don't just find one parameter that gives you the optimal agreement between simulated and real data. You typically get several parameters, and that indicates intrinsic uncertainty. And we want to reliably quantify this uncertainty. So our CDT on uncertainty quantification in digital twins, you see that word uncertainty quantification in our title, focuses on parameter estimation and calibration of digital twins in real time, and sound uncertainty quantification, because this is absolutely critical and important for practical decision support if you want, for example, to do reliable risk assessment of, say, treatment options for digital twin in medicine, but for other applications, obviously, as well. So this requires new skill sets. It requires knowledge of physical modeling in order to design a good digital twin in the first place. It requires knowledge of statistical inference for parameter estimation and certainly quantification, and machine learning for doing that efficiently, such that we get robust estimation of parameters and calibration in real time. So let me run through a few example application areas that our CDT will focus on. As I've already mentioned, we have applications in health, with particular focus on cardiovascular diseases. Example, we want to use digital twins to optimize medical devices for cardiovascular disease treatment in a patient-specific manner. Another application in the area of energy. For example, we want to use digital twins based on fluid dynamics to develop solutions for the optimization of hydrogen storage and wind power generation. We have environmental applications. We want to exploit the digital twin framework to develop novel agricultural practices and ensure a safe and sustainable food supply. We have applications in epidemiology. For example, we are focusing on the development of digital twins to elucidate the threat to fish caused by sea lice, including infestation and infection patterns. And we have the applications in defense related to using digital twins to design new types of unmanned aerial vehicles with unique capabilities for defense purposes. We are looking for external partners to provide partial funding for PhD students. So if you are already considering funding a PhD project related to digital twins, then doing this as part of our CDT will have the opportunity, the advantage that your student will be a member of a larger cohort of students facing similar methodological challenges, and your PhD student will also benefit from the training infrastructure that we will provide. And that includes technical skills, as I've already mentioned. We want to combine and bring together skills related to physical modeling, statistical inference, and machine learning. But we will also cover transferable skills. So we have established a partnership with the Newton Gateway to Mathematics to provide transferable skills training in science communication, knowledge exchange and engagement, and research ethics. As a external partner, you will be a member of our strategy board. The strategy board includes the representatives from all external partners. And this will allow you to influence the decision-making in the CDT and provide contributions and inputs to influence the strategic direction of the CDT. If you're interested in joining our CDT as an external partner, please get in contact. Please send me an email. Send an email to, you see that here shown in blue, dirk.husmeier@glasgow.ac.uk. So it's spelled dirk.husmeier@glasgow.ac.uk. We will need a letter of support from you by September the 1st. And we can provide a template. So again, if you're interested in collaborating with us and joining our CDT as an external partner, please get in contact with me and I can provide further details. Thank you very much for watching this video.